Good evening. The City of Bothell Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 4th will come to order. Let the record show that all commissioners are present and accounted for except for Commissioner Gastineau, who is absent and excused. Are there any, we do have a fairly full agenda this evening, and I'm assuming those in the room have seen that agenda, or that there are agendas available, I believe. If not, but are there any non-agenda public comments? Seeing none, we have no minutes to approve. I don't believe we have any new business. So we're going to move right into our main agenda item for the evening, which is a continuation of the public hearing on the 2015 periodic plan and code update. We have 3 agenda items this evening. A second review of the Canyon Park sub-area plan, a 5th review of the land use element, and the first item that we're going to have on our agenda this evening is a recommendation from staff to defer certain requests. And those requests pertain to the following. A particular parcel on Nike Hill, another request, the Malik request in Queensboro, Brentwood, Crystal Springs sub-area, the Wayne Golf Course Clubhouse area request, and the Furman or South Riverside request. So before I would ask staff if there was any staff information that you want to present to us, do we want to do that first? Or do we want to go ahead and open this up to the public?
I have a very brief presentation on just to flesh out those.
On that particular agenda item?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
thanks. We'll have Dave Boyd give us a presentation then on that particular agenda item. Thank you.
Okay. So as Chairman, good evening. As Chairman Booth noted, there are 4 requests that we're going to discuss briefly and suggest that they be deferred for further consideration until after the June 30th periodic plan and code update deadline. Due to their scale, scope, the complexity or controversial nature, or because of relation to other complex requests. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Wayne Golf Course in the Waynita Simons Norway Hill sub-area. Not in order, but the Malik rezone proposal is related to the Nike Hill rezone proposal. So those kind of go together. And then the South Riverside rezone proposal, or the Furman request, is the 4th one. So the Wayne Golf Course request, as you know, is to allow development of a new clubhouse and up to 76 townhomes on a 4.1 acre tract surrounding the existing clubhouse that is not subject to the conservation easement restrictions for the rest of the front 9, as shown in this King County assessor's map below. Probably not very readable, but it does identify that area is not covered by the conservation easement. This one we are suggesting deferral because for a couple of reasons. One, we were prepared to do the traffic analysis for this particular proposal, but we do need more time to do an analysis of the cumulative effects along that corridor, as has been requested. Also, just the sheer volume of the comments that we expect will continue as that goes forward, I think would just prevent us from getting the other work done on this sub-area. The second one in the Waynita Simons Norway Hill sub-area is the South Riverside request that came from Rob Furman. The original request was just for 2 parcels owned by the Furmans that are outlined in yellow there. Staff felt that that it was appropriate for Planning Commission to consider that entire R9600 area from the freeway to the specialized senior housing overlay that's outlined in red here. And because of that larger scope, again, similar to the Wayne Golf Course, there were some concerns about traffic impacts and the cumulative impacts both along East Riverside and and the effect on 112th Avenue coming down from Norway Hill. So to really give those issues the attention that they deserve, we feel that that one should also be deferred. We would note that that additional scope and complexity is something that staff has recommended, and that Planning Commission did agree to consider, but it would also be, one option would be to narrow this down to just the original two properties for which the request was made. We would, in that case, we would recommend that you also defer consideration of rezone for the larger area to a future date. The next request is the Nike Hill rezone proposal from Mike Harmon of Coast Equity Partners, and who originally proposed a study of 5 parcels on Nike Hill. One that's the center one here that's owned by Coast Equity Partners for higher intensity development related to the Neighborhood Activity Center at 228th and Meridian. The area isn't needed to meet our growth targets, and we really need to do quite a bit of further research on the critical areas implications of this one, access issues. We have not been able to connect with all of the property owners that would be affected. So there are a number of questions that remain here, and that cause us to strongly recommend deferring this one. And related to that one is there was a property owner request, a much smaller property owner request from Bashir Malik, just kitty corner from this area in the Queensboro, Brentwood, Crystal Springs sub-area. This was one that we suggested should be expanded at least to the areas outlined in yellow there, and probably also including the parcel to the north outlined in white. But this really makes sense to fold into that larger Nike Hill study, and possibly even the southeast corner of that intersection. So the proponents of that one were willing to go along with that deferral. So that's just in a nutshell the reasons why we're suggesting deferral. I'm ready to take any questions or comments, and then move on to public testimony, if any. We would encourage that you urge the citizens here to limit their comments just to the question of deferral, not to the merits of the actual proposals, and then recommended action to move to defer the further deliberations on these 4 items.
Thanks, Mr. Boyd. Any questions of staff at this point? Commissioner Clark.
Thank you, David. Just one quick question. Could you clarify on the Malik request, kind of I couldn't quite make out the area in yellow. There were 2 different pictures. One was, both had yellow on them, and then you mentioned an area that was white that was outside of that. Could you clarify that?
Thank you, Bruce. Perhaps it'll be clearer with the lights down. So the Malik's on the property right on the corner with the yellow asterisk. We would suggest at the minimum that we consider these 4 parcels on the corner, and then it probably makes sense to also consider this larger parcel to the north, which just went on the market, by the way. That would kind of more or less square off the neighborhood business zoning on the northwest corner of that intersection, and start to provide zoning that could really see that whole intersection develop as a neighborhood activity center.
Okay, so in the illustration on the right, the yellow area, that has nothing to do with.
That's just showing where this is in the Queensboro, Brentwood, Crystal Springs sub area down here. This aerial photo is a inset of this.
Okay, thank you.
A blow up of that inset.
So just to follow up along, so I'm trying to read that. That is currently neighborhood business?
It's
Or-
currently R7200. The Malik's neighborhood business is across the street. So the Malik's requested zoning that would allow them to build a fourplex on their parcel.
So what is staff proposing for the new zoning?
Well, to do a fourplex, it would require R2800 zoning, considering that they would probably have to dedicate some property for the roadway, 228th. We would also suggest that we look into adding a neighborhood business designation onto that.
Okay.
So you could have some businesses on the ground floor and possibly some housing above.
Right, thank you. Any other questions of staff?
Yeah,
Commissioner Stahl.
I did. Last time we were looking at this group of requests, there was also another request, the Gastineau request on Riverside Drive. Is that, I guess I was expecting to see that in the list, and I just wanted to check what's the status of that request.
So when we bring the Waynita Simons Norway Hill sub-area back to you, we'll bring a revised request from Mr. and Mrs. Gastineau. They've basically suggested reducing that to just a minor boundary adjustment to eliminate the one split zone parcel in that Easton Avenue area. So it's a much reduced scope and something that I think can be handled within the scope of our periodic plan and code update.
And what's the approximate date that's coming back?
That's coming back on the 25th. The Shelton View and Queensboro sub-areas are coming back next week on the 11th. But if you do defer these, we'll remove those items from the agenda and just focus on the other items for those sub-areas.
So for some of these, it makes a lot of sense to defer, especially the Wayne Golf Course, for exactly the reasons that you said. There's a lot to look into that. And the Nike Hill ones, I get that as well. For the other Riverside request, I think I'd actually like to go ahead with that sooner, perhaps at the same time that we're looking at the Gastineau request that's also on Riverside. But I think we have enough information on that one to go ahead and consider it rather than defer it to after June 30th. So I guess procedurally, do I just make a motion to do that?
Well, I guess I would raise the question about whether you want to take public testimony before you deliberate on this and take an action, if there is any.
Why don't we go ahead and allow public testimony, and then we'll go ahead and do our actions. Okay. So are there any other questions of staff just specifically to this presentation?
I've got a thought or a comment on the Rob Furman request. Instead of looking at what the staff was suggesting of rezoning or changing the zoning on the entire area, maybe we just focus for now on those two parcels and move that along. Because I think the difference, if I recall, was the 9600 to a 7200 was like 2 or 3 homes or something of that nature. Is that accurate?
On their parcels,
right?
Yeah, it was a small number,
minimal.
Yeah.
So would it be problematic if we just focused on those two parcels and then suggested to the staff that they come back with kind of that whole sub area, looking at an overlay or something of that nature, after we're done with a comprehensive plan update?
Well, we do think it'd be best to do them all together, but if you do want to move forward on that request, on their original request, just for their two parcels, that's what we would recommend. I think to do the entire area as part of this plan and code update would be difficult.
Okay, at this point, I think we're going to, thank you, Dave, open it up for public testimony. And if we want to bring the lights up, we can do that. We do have a fair number of folks in the room this evening, and so if there are any of you that would care to give testimony to the presentation that staff has provided, and I guess I would just say, just to remind you that we're taking comments on the motion to defer. We'll discuss the merits of it or of each request at a future time. So we'd really like to ask you to limit your comments this evening to 3 minutes or less, but this is your opportunity to come forward. Yes, sir.
Tom Cobb.
I'm sorry, just please, state into the microphone your name and address.
Tom Cobb, 9623 Riverbend Drive.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to, really more a question back maybe to David or to you guys. I just want to understand the deferral process. Because I think generally everybody's for that, I guess. But I don't completely understand when the process picks back up. So I guess I have a minor concern that, not to editorialize too much, minor concern about city motives in terms of, is it just maybe to let the opposition lose momentum? So what exactly, how does that process work? The deferral occurs, it's set up to June 30th. When does it come back onto the docket? Are we going to have a better process for the notification on that? Because I think you recall that the process for notification to the neighboring residents was pretty weak. So anyways.
All right, thank you. Is there a staff comment? Yeah, Gary.
Sure, I'd be glad to respond to that. Staff's intention is that, well, for the public's edification, we're in a process at the moment called the 2015 Periodic Plan and Code Update. That's a state-mandated update of our comprehensive plan and any implementing regulations. Under state law, we have to have that process completed and the plan update adopted by June 30th of this year. As Dave has already mentioned in his presentation, we feel that the scale, scope, complexity, or even controversial nature of some of these proposals would prevent us from meeting that deadline, and we really need to meet that deadline for a number of legal reasons. So our proposal is that for any items the Commission might defer, we would begin work on those immediately after adoption of the plan update, so as early as July 1st. And our intent would be to have those completed by the end of the year, if possible. And I think we can do that.
I think the only thing I would add is that the June 30th date that Gary refers to is the date that the plan needs to be approved not only by the Planning Commission, but by the City Council. And so the Planning Commission needs to be done with our part of that by the end of March to allow a minimum of 3 months for them to do a review of it. And so there is a strong sense of urgency in front of us here on the Planning Commission to complete that work. We're making timely progress, but there's not to bore you with a lot of the details, but there are 17 planning areas inside the city of Bothell, each one of them needing to be reworked, as well as overriding elements that are citywide, and it's a considerable amount of time and work.
Doesn't the Wayne project still get treated under that? So how's it going to get addressed if you don't consider it because the deadline was...
Oh, no, yeah, I mean, whether it's Wayne or any of the others, they would move as they would at any other period of time. This plan update occurs every 8 years, right?
Correct.
And so, with that not in place, then any parcel request would move as it would at any other time.
Correct. We consider plan amendment requests each year as part of the annual docket. So we can do that outside of this process. It's just that this particular process has that set deadline. I would also note that deferring items in particular, such as Wayne Golf Course, I think will allow us to do a much better job with citizen outreach and keeping people informed. One of the challenges we have in trying to meet the June 30th deadline is we're trying to process everything and try to keep people informed at the same time with a fairly limited resource. I mean, the staff working on this are all in front of you. So I think we can do a better job on those items if they are deferred.
Are there any other citizen? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Ken Bellamy, 5508 Lakeview Drive, Kirkland. I'm here representing the owners of the Wayne Golf Course. And just a bit of background, we're working to find a solution for the use of this property which is acceptable to everyone involved. To that end, we recently gave written right of first opportunity to purchase to the city of Bothell, as is set forth in the conservation easement. And that gives the city 45 days to make us a proposal to purchase the property if they wish to do so. I've also met with representatives of One Bothell to discuss their interest in acquiring the property and maintaining it as a public open space. We look forward to learning more about this over the next few weeks. While we're discussing these and other alternatives that may come up, it's important that the Wayne Golf Course clubhouse area request remain on the Planning Commission's agenda. We are in the unfortunate position of continuing to lose money on the operation of the golf course. And if the alternatives currently being discussed do not move forward, the delay under consideration tonight until a unspecified time after June 15th may require us to pursue more immediate solutions which could be less desirable for ourselves, but also for the long-range goals of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Claudia Elsmore, 17320 Riverside Place. I know that David brought up the traffic issue down on Riverside Drive, but there's more than just that, and I took that from your 2004 comprehensive plan that I was involved with. And we're talking that there's erosive soil issues by rezoning this area from a 72, which is a request from landowners. The area is zone 9600, and this is all your documentation. It's not mine, that I researched, to the south, to the east, to the west, to the north, and to pinpoint one little area to go to 7200 because of a request. It's just a request. The other issue, like I said, is the erosive soils diagram, and it puts those two pieces of property right smack in the middle. Again, this is all your documentation. Again, it's in the critical area. Diagram goes from 405 all the way down to Juanita Way. This whole area is in your critical area. Again, landslide prone area. This is I don't know what the percentage is of that area for landslides, but you have little areas all docketed in here of potential landslides and documented landslides. Another one is the last traffic, and I agree with Dave on that, was back in 2002 to 2004. The number of vehicles per day, but it doesn't really give the time of day that those vehicles were accounted for. And I just want to have this Planning Commission look at the entire area. And I'm sorry that there is nobody else here. We thought this was more of a deferral versus my recommendation to go ahead and move forward for the rezoning and the next meeting on the 23rd of February. So I think more people would have came. I think they were just looking at this was a deferral along with the other four requests. But and I wasn't really prepared. I'm glad I grabbed this before I left my house. But it does incorporate a lot of different aspects and conditions that I don't think are being addressed. And I don't know, 3 or 4 more houses, 5 or 10 more houses. I don't know what the number is if we go from a 9,600 to a 7,200. A few is a few. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Can I just clarify that this sub-area will come back to you on February 25th, right, not the 23rd?
Understood. Thanks.
Hello. Excuse me. My name is James McNeil, 16314 Valhalla Drive. I just want to thank the Planning Commission for having us tonight. And I also want to thank Ken Bellamy for reaching out to onebothell.org to sit down and start talking about how we can continue to keep the Wayne Golf Course in our community. I think that was very nice of him and the Richards to do that. I need to understand a little bit more about the deferral process and how that could affect what we're trying to do with negotiations with the state and the county. Does that hinder us at all from negotiating with them, and how does that affect the plan that you guys are trying to prepare for in June? Should it be in that plan, or because they've indicated they want to sell, and they have a 45-day period? How does that affect us?
You want to go ahead with respond to that?
Deferring the plan request for the clubhouse area should not affect any negotiations that you might be involved in at all. And the Wainita sub-area is currently before the Planning Commission. They would simply continue with that sub-area plan without considering the specific request for the clubhouse area.
So the city could engage with One Bothell, the state, and the county on that negotiation? And
Certainly.
okay. And who would be the person that we would work with on that?
In terms of city staff,
That's correct, yes.
I would say start off by contacting the city manager's office.
Bob Stowe?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
All right. Thank you all for hearing our comments.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Paulo Furman, 11203 East Riverside Drive. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I just have one simple request, that the south rezone of East Riverside Drive not be deferred, that it will be heard as planned on February 25th as scheduled. This is a small, straightforward, simple request, and it's unfortunate it's been grouped with other more complex rezones that have really nothing to do with East Riverside Drive. We are merely requesting that the recommendations of the city staff from the last meeting, as you all recall, it went a little late into the evening, be heard and voted on as scheduled on February 25th. I have some information I'll hand to you at the end, but we're, like I said, the only reason that was not voted on the last meeting was the rezone right before us took a couple hours of testimony, a couple delays and other things that stretched it out, and this small request was deferred to February 25th, and we hope that it can go forward to the council for consideration after that point. But just a reminder, at the last meeting, there were no requests from the Planning Commission or to staff to do any further analysis or to provide any additional studies. And there was a question earlier about the number of homes. That's in this. I'll show it to you when you get it. It's if the entire area was built out at the maximum, which does not happen. The total area, according to the city's recommendations, is about 22 or 23 homes additionally, if everything built out, which over the last 100 years it hasn't. So, last on the difference in zoning, whether it's a 7,200 or 9,600 square foot lot, the impervious surface coverage and everything else is the same. If it's unbuildable because of critical areas and buffers and hillsides, it's still unbuildable because of those same things. We're just talking about whether we are environmentally friendly with the remaining land. And that's all. I just ask you to please not defer the specific, simple rezone request. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have these to hand you. If I may approach the bench.
Any other comments from the public? Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and pass these up, and let's enter these as Exhibit 37. That's where we're at in the counting the ones I've received since the last.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we'll close the public comment part of the agenda at this point. So at this point, we're going to consider the 4 requests for deferral, these 4 particular parcel requests. So is there a motion to either look at one or all of these requests?
I would motion that we go ahead with the South Riverside request on February 25th.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Let the record show the motion passed with 5 supporting and 1 opposed. With regards to the other 3 requests.
Could I just throw a quick comment in there?
Sure.
I like the clarification you provided, because I had kind of the same question about what was the timing of reintroducing these if they were deferred. I think that what I would like to do is talk about a motion that would set a date for, essentially you're saying, I think, July 1st, and that we would try to work toward getting those completed by the end of 2015. I'd like to, if there is a motion, have that language in there that's more specific about the date. I think the proposed motion of just deferring it until after June 30th was, I think, a bit ambiguous.
Do we have a specific date that it would be deferred to? Do we know that already?
We don't, and the reason that we didn't give you a specific date was simply because we're trying to look forward 6 or 7 months, but we certainly will commit to bringing them to you as soon as possible after adoption, and I do believe that we can complete them by the end of the year. There's a possibility that, for example, Wayne Golf Course, because of the amount of public testimony involved, could go past the end of the year. We would certainly try to have it done by then, but I'd be a little hesitant to say we'll have them adopted by the end of the year. But we would certainly commit to bringing them to you as soon as possible after adoption of the periodic plan and code update.
What kind of language could we, I guess, make it a little more clear that the intent is to move quickly after June 30th as opposed to just after? I mean, could we say, I'm not really sure what you would add to the language to a motion to make people feel.
I mean, if you felt comfortable adding something like, for the items to come back to the Planning Commission as soon as is practically possible after adoption of the 2015 periodic plan and update. I mean, it's vague, it's general, but I mean, it gives us a direction.
Can we add a not to exceed a specific date? Is that?
If you wish, you can make a motion to whatever you want, really.
Yeah.
I think you're picking up that we recognize there may be some wisdom to deferral, but we'd like to have some structure around how long that deferral would be.
No, and we understand that completely, and actually we feel the same way. We're not looking to defer these and not work on them again for a long time.
So it's a combination of wanting to do our due diligence effectively, allow the time for our questions to be addressed, and there's also some citizens want this to go faster, some citizens don't, and so we want to kind of proceed in, I guess, what I would call a timely manner. Right now, we're just saying after June 30th, but if we could provide something a little more
I think
clear.
it's absolutely fine to say, and bring the items back to the Planning Commission as soon as possible after June 30th, with the hope that they'll be completed by the end of the year. I think you can certainly do that.
Dave?
And by completed, I think you're referring to Planning Commission work would be completed by the end of the year, correct? Because these will have to go into the 2016 comp plan amendments. Yeah.
They would, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to wait until the end of 2016 to adopt plan amendments for those. I would.
Well, give me just a little bit of
anticipate that we
getting it
wouldn't.
into the 2015 comp plan. Is that what's the schedule connected with that?
So the Growth Management Act allows us to, permits us to update our comprehensive plan no more than once a year, except under special circumstances, for example, such as emergencies. So Dave is correct. We couldn't actually adopt any additional plan amendments, for example, before January 1st of 2016. But certainly in January or sometime early in 2016, we could. Typically, we work on an annual docket, so plan amendments, if there are any, typically get adopted towards the end of the year, simply because we've been working on the annual docket. But there's nothing to prevent them being adopted earlier in 2016, and those would constitute our 2016 plan amendments.
I think my concern here about the timing is just that the public deserves closure one way or the other. If it's going to happen, knowing that. But at the same time, continuing to defer it, just for, we heard a lot of testimony for people that didn't want that to happen. That's just this dark cloud hanging over their head that just keeps going. So,
No,
either way,
we understand. We're asking for a temporary deferral here, so that we can work on these in a much more timely fashion, and take more time on them and give them the deliberation they really deserve, without the deadline of the periodic plan and code update hanging over us. And as Chair Booth has already said, I don't think we can get these done before June 30th, given that the Planning Commission is going to start deliberations on the entire integrated plan update in early March. So we're simply asking for a temporary deferral. We will commit to working on them as soon as the plan update has been adopted. I believe we can get through everything by the end of the year, and I think if we do that, we can certainly adopt the plan amendments in early 2016, and by that I mean probably January.
Well, I'm
Commissioner
ready
Gabe.
to...
So overall, we're looking at about a 6-month delay at a minimum, for the people that have proposals that we're talking about deferral.
Yes, I believe so.
So end of June versus first part of January.
Correct.
Okay. And because they're on the 2015 docket, if we were able to get through one or two of these proposals ahead of December 2015, there's no way we could adopt them in August or whenever we get them to closure. We have to wait till January.
I don't believe so. We need to look more carefully at the Growth and Management Act and consult the city attorney, but there are very few exceptions to the one plan amendment per year, which is why we try to keep all the plan amendments together and then adopt them at the end of the year, so we only have to do an adoption once. But we could look into that, but I certainly can't promise that we could adopt them before the end of 2015.
Well, I think you're picking up from us that for I think 3 of these requests, we'll do our motions here, but I think there'll be support for a deferral. But we just would like motion or movement on them in a very timely manner after that.
No, we completely understand that, and we completely agree with you. It's not our intention to hold these out there for a long time either. We want to get them done as well. The property owners who have made the request deserve them to be heard, and people who are affected by them deserve to be heard, and we agree with that entirely.
Right. Any other questions of staff? I think we're ready to. We can either do a motion for all 3 or each one separately. I'll leave it up to you.
I'll make a motion. I would make a motion that we defer the Coast Equity Partners Mike Harmon request, the Malik request, and the Wayne Golf Course Clubhouse area request to as soon as possible after June 30th, with a priority placed on these three requests, to work on these as a priority through the remainder of 2015.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, moving on in our agenda. We're now going to go to the second review of the Canyon Park sub-area plan.
Chair, if I might suggest a very brief 2 or 3 minute recess might be in order so that the room can clear and we can set up our next presentation
All right.
for you.
Let's take a 5-minute recess. We'll now continue our public hearing with the second agenda item, which is a second review of the Canyon Park sub-area. And we'll have now a presentation from staff. Bruce Blackburn. Welcome, Bruce.
Good day. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members and members of the public. This is, of course, the second review of the Canyon Park sub-area plan. And essentially what happens is that we all know what sub-area plans do. Basically, they have the detailed provisions that we apply within our zoning and our regulatory provisions to kind of establish special characters. And, of course, the Canyon Park sub-area is located in the north portion of the city, right, and it's a very large sub-area. It's basically almost 1,000 acres or 1.5 square miles. And it's a very major employment center for the city, and a portion of the sub-area has been identified as a regional growth center by the Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2040 plan, which is basically our multi-county-wide planning policies that we have to implement within these provisions. And, of course, as the Commission is aware, we are currently operating underneath a capacity deficit for the comprehensive plan. We are in a deficit of about 3,500 folks that we need to make up within the Snohomish County portion of the city. And our proposal from the staff is to implement that through the addition of a residential activity center upon lands that currently do not have any residential component to them. Basically, in this outlined in the red dashed line here, then essentially all these areas that you see in black of OPLI or OPCB MVSO would be added an RAC, Residential Activity Center designation, and we would propose a 65-foot height capacity. Now, what that does for our capacity is that Snohomish County demographers did a calculation of what that would do for us, and that gets us to about 4,500 people. That really takes care of that capacity deficit. And of course, this is just a little bit more detail. Originally, we had a lot of discussion about potentially implementing a transfer of development rights program within this area. We've kind of backed off from that now, simply from the standpoint the complexity is such that we don't think we can really implement it by the time we get to the June 30th deadline. As well as, of course, we had some discussion with some landowners who are a little bit hesitant about jumping into that type of a program without a little bit more information that we would allow us to be done basically through a special master planning process we'd like to go through in this sub-area. We've got some plan policies that would implement that one as well. So tonight, if you have any questions, take public testimony, and of course we have a recommended motion that you close your deliberations on this sub-area and adopt the staff recommendation as the Planning Commission recommendation, and we'll move on to the next item. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Are there any questions of staff at this time? Are there any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to us just for any other. I have a few questions, but I'll open it up to the rest of you initially if you have any. Commissioner Vliet?
Oh, after when we do the initial questions, would we then go through page by page, or are we going to do that or not? Really?
I don't think we necessarily need to do that. I'd actually prefer not to. What I'd rather do is just ask your questions. I know we've each gone through it, and so I don't think that's necessary. Did you have some questions at this time?
I just had a few notations on some of the pages, yeah, but...
Okay. Well, there's an opportunity. We'll have an opportunity for you to do that. Any others? Well, I had a few, and so thanks again for your presentation, Bruce. So mine initially would be around the RAC designation and the recommendation from staff that there would be a range of 4 to 6 stories, 45 to 65 feet. I don't have a problem with your recommendation, but since we've got some kind of real precise numbers that we've looked at, 4498 additional capacity, this 3554, just take me, target deficit, just take me a little, and I don't need to get into great detail, but since we have some specific numbers, take me a little, just under the covers a little bit as to how you would, if we add that RAC designation, how we come up with this additional capacity. And I've got some ideas in my mind that if you've got a 4-story building at certain amount of density, and just take me through that formula as to how we're coming up with this additional capacity by adding this RAC.
Actually, we have our buildable lands expert right here, so I'm going to let him take that one.
Okay.
Thanks, Bruce.
You're welcome.
I'll be happy to answer that. When the county staff, buildable land staff, looked at this scenario for us, they ran it through their buildable lands methodology. So in other words, they looked at each parcel. We looked at all the parcels essentially in 2 chunks. A first set that we thought would develop earlier, and then a second part. So that's where on the table Bruce showed you there were 2 columns. Mm-hmm. So when we look at the total, we were looking at the county's methodology for mixed-use development and typical mixed-use development. They didn't specifically look at 65 feet, but they looked at 5 floors, which is the typical mixed-use development. So a ground floor of office or retail with 4 or 5 floors over that of residential. And using that and their methodology for buildable lands, that's how they came up with the numbers. So even though they weren't looking at 65 feet expressly, I did talk to them, and they feel that their methodology is as close to 65 feet as you can get. It's essentially the same floor number. So we feel pretty comfortable with our recommendation being very close to that number, and in fact, that's why we're making that height recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So that was really my only question with regards to, hold on. The only other, I have some comments on the next agenda item. The only other comment that I have with regards to the Canyon Park, really the whole plan, and my next comment was with regards to the sub-area plan and in the summary, so this is page CP3. And we have a number of what I would call aspirational goals. They're actually summarized as to continued improvements, construction of sideways, et cetera, continued development of Canyon Park and Thrasher's Corner. And I'm in support of all of these. But my question for you is there any thought to a process for this particular sub-area somewhat similar to what we went through with the downtown sub-area? And I know we've, in some sense, called downtown the heart of Bothell, but do we, because of the kind of the unique way that Bothell's laid out, spanning two counties, there's this kind of north and south part of our city. Is there any thought to kind of, I don't know if we need a second heart or a peripheral heart, or kind of having some type of community, I guess I would just say, community vision. And what city could do, the city staff could do, is to kind of pull together the constituents that we did for downtown, and could we do something similar for that? And if the answer is yes, could we add some kind of line item there as to something that we'd aspire to do?
Sorry. Yes. Essentially what happened is that we actually had always planned on doing a pretty detailed comprehensive planning for this sub-area. And unfortunately, it was just the fact that the funding wasn't there for us to be able to go forward with that. We actually have an action underneath our land use element that talks about the potential for when we do a future plan amendment process to investigate and consider a transfer of development rights. That would be the time we would do that, kind of like master planning for this sub-area. And do kind of the things that we did with the downtown area, but try and identify that different flavor we want to apply here. As you identified, we don't want to duplicate the same thing here and there, but we do want to make sure that this regional center thrives and functions the way we want it, and also has the appearance that we want. So that is a future process that we actually are kind of excited about, because we get to do a lot of it outreach and we get to do a lot of design work. So that is one of the things that I think is really appropriate to have.
So thank you for your support for that, and I think that what I would request of staff is that if you could add a line item somewhere, either in the summary or at an appropriate place. I think both our citizens would appreciate that, and I think there's support on the city council for that, and I think getting ahead of it and kind of, not, as I said, all of these different bullet items that we have here I think are good, but if we could kind of say we're going to institute some type of a process, an inclusive process that we, whether we want to reference the downtown process or not, but I think that would be a healthy addition to this sub-area plan.
Yeah, we'll craft something like that for you.
Commissioner Clark?
I might add a suggestion to that, or ask a question, I guess. Is it possible for us to craft that line right now so that we could make a motion to accept your staff recommendation and move on at this time without needing this to come back to us again? I think in the interest of trying to move through these things and meet our deadline. Is that possible?
We could certainly try that, or you're going to see the integrated plan come back to you. We could make it a point to show you that when it comes back, if you would be happy with that. Or
we could do that and still make a motion to close the deliberations.
You can. I mean, yes. If you give us direction to add that, we will do that and bring it back as part of the integrated review.
Yeah, I appreciate the desire to kind of really move forward with this, so thank you for the support. I didn't come in with kind of a wordsmith item, so, I mean, we could do that now, but let's ask staff to come back to us on our next deliberation on this sub-area with that added.
Okay.
And so consider that part of it. I think we'll go ahead with our motion to approve, but consider that a request as part of that motion. If there are no other requests or questions of staff, then Commissioner Vliet.
I got
yes.
a couple. I got a few pages, a few kind of minor things probably, but on a CP4, it references figure 2. I think it's supposed to be figure 1, about halfway down the page. I don't know if that's so important, but because it's talking about the physical geography, and I think that's figure 1.
You made a change from figure 3 to figure 2. Is that, you're saying that should in fact be figure 1?
I think so.
Yeah, I think he's.
Yeah, it actually should be figure 1, yes.
Okay.
Cool. Let's see. And then on CP11, just a, I don't know, typographical thing for me. It just looks odd. The talks about 217th Street and 214th Street. It's like capital S, capital T, and I don't know. It just, I don't know if it's I don't know if it should be lowercase t or abbreviated or spelled out or something. But
And which policy number is that?
CP11.
Yeah, the page, but the
Which number?
yeah.
Oh, 6 and 7.
6
Oh, 6 and 7. Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
I don't know. Just I didn't know if it was abbreviated for something else. If I were just glance at it, that's pretty small. Let's see. And then on CP13, policy number 5. I'm wondering if, because you talk about it further on, if it could be referred to as improve North Creek watershed, or does that broaden the scope of it too much? Since there's so many creeks kind of it being intertwined in the sub-area.
And which one again was that one?
Number 5 on CP13.
Well, if we
Oh.
change that from improved North Creek to the North Creek watershed, what have we now opened that up? Is there a change of what we've?
Well,
What
the
we're-
fish
what-
habitat is within the creek itself. And so that's
Okay.
really kind of where you want to focus your efforts.
Okay.
Certainly there's other things that you want to do within the watershed, but, you know, there's a whole bunch of other items there. But, yeah, the fish habitat, which is what this action or policy speaks to, is actually North Creek, so.
Okay. Ignoring that one then. And then on CP19, there's 2 different, just to maybe shorten it, I don't know if I can get recommendations from other commission members here, but I guess it's numbers 7 and 10 on CP19. They kind of are the same. It looks like they could almost be combined or something. If it,
Yeah, it does.
Oh, it is. They're a duplicate, aren't they? Interesting.
but they are a little bit different, but they say a lot of the same things. So I don't know if you can combine them and get rid of one of them maybe, or I mean, just combine them, I guess.
Yeah, I'll make sure and bring that to the Transportation Division's attention, because as they go through all these sub-areas and make revisions, make sure they catch this one.
Okay. That's it for me.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments of staff? All right. At this point, then, we are ready to move forward with the recommended motion. Are we ready to go forward with that? Commissioner Clark.
I see a motion on the board and a motion here in our packet that are different. Do we need to adopt both, or?
I just go with the one on the overhead. Unfortunately, what happens, we had a little different philosophy when we were doing the memorandum last week.
I would move to close deliberations regarding the Canyon Park sub-area plan and adopt the staff recommendation as the Planning Commission recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Let's move to item 3 on our agenda, which is the land use element of the periodic plan and code update. And Gary's coming to the podium, and we'll turn the agenda, or turn the microphone over to you, Gary.
Thank you. If I can have just 30 seconds here to pull my presentation up. So this is the Commission's 5th review of the land use element. I'm going to skip over this first slide. You've seen it 4 times already. It talks about the Growth Management Act and how the land use element is a required element. So it's been a couple months since you last saw land use. I think it was November 25th or so, or 29th. When you last gave me direction to take this away and bring back certain things, I'm going to show you all that in my slide presentation. In addition, I'm going to go over a couple of items that I think we've already discussed with you, but that I'll go back over so that you recall them, and also for the sake of anybody who might be watching or listening. So one of the major issues that we were initially looking at as part of the land use element was the integration of the transfer of development rights program into the land use element. And as we talked about on January 21st, we're now recommending that we have some general goals, policies, and actions in the land use element regarding TDR, and hold off on implementation of a full-blown program until we actually look at the Canyon Park Business Center urban design study that we've been talking about, which we think will take place in 2016 and continue into 2017. So this is an item that you've seen before. You concurred with that recommendation on January 21st, but I just wanted to make sure that you saw it again and it was in your mind. So those general goals, policies, and actions for the land use element regarding transfer of development rights, I've put a recommendation in your packet. There's a single goal, a single policy, and a single action, and I can read through those very quickly. The goal would read, to promote Growth Management Act goals of preventing sprawl and preserving rural resource lands by considering transfer of development rights as a land use development tool and potential source of tax increment financing for the city. The goals of preventing sprawl and preserving rural resource lands are specific goals of TDR programs. We heard those from the county. Growth management also talks about that as a TDR goal. So that's the reason for that specific language. And then the result of TDR is essentially to attempt to provide revenues to the city through a form of tax increment financing. So in terms of a broad goal, I thought that got to the purpose of it and the hopeful result of it for the city. The implementing policy for that goal reads, support state growth management principles by exploring the potential benefits to Bothell property owners and the city at large of a transfer of development rights program. So that's essentially simply saying that in order to work towards that goal, we're going to continue exploring implementation of a TDR program, both for Bothell citizens and property owners and for the city itself. Then the implementing action for that policy and goal would be explore adoption of a transfer of development rights TDR program as part of an urban design study for the Canyon Park Regional Growth Center. Such a program should not be limited to just the RGC, however, but should consider other areas of the city as part of a potential local infrastructure project area, or LIPA. Should an urban design study for the RGC not be funded as anticipated for 2016-17, consideration of adoption of a TDR program should occur separately. So there we're simply identifying that the Canyon Park Business Center is one of the focuses of a potential TDR program, but we're not going to exclude downtown necessarily. Remember, we talked about this potential area that might look like a barbell. So we don't want to throw out the downtown area, even though we're looking at TDR as part of this Canyon Park Center. And then I felt it was maybe a good idea to put a note in there just in case something happens, we don't get funding for the RGC urban design study, that we would try and move forward with TDR anyway and try and wrap it up. So those are my recommendations to you for a goal, policy, and action regarding TDR. If you recall, there are also proposed amendments to Land Use Policy 4 to exclude from the calculations for net buildable area surface stormwater retention detention water quality facilities. You had deliberated this issue and preliminarily endorsed the staff recommendation on September 10th, but I wanted to bring it to your attention again. But in the red, you'll see the new item there with regards to this, and that is that in addition to the proposed plan language deletion on page LU 32, which you've already seen, 2 amendments to the Bothell Municipal Code are required to implement this change, and they are to BMC 1214-030 B2D and 1214-030 B3C. That proposed code language is in your packet. It's at the very back of your packet. It follows the plan, the land use element itself. And essentially the language is exactly as it is in LU 32. It just implements it through the code. And then related to this item, we're also proposing revising the table in BMC 121403OA in order to separate the information pertaining to the R5400A and R5400D zones. This is essentially a housekeeping item. When we went into the code language to implement LU 32, the plan language on deletion on page LU 32, we noticed that table is really hard to read with regards to R5400A and R5400D because they were all shoved into one column. We're simply proposing a housekeeping amendment that would separate those out and just make them more readable. There are no material changes being proposed. One of the other items which you've already covered and that I wanted to bring to your attention again was review of Bothell Municipal Code 1206-140B9, which permits up to 8 unrelated persons to occupy a single-family dwelling. If you recall, this was a citizen request that you deliberated, back in November, I believe it was, you made a preliminary recommendation to change the 8 unrelated persons to 6 unrelated persons. And that would be implemented, again, in BMC 1206-140B9. So you can see the code language there beneath, right there. And it's as simple as a matter as changing the 8 to 6. One of the commissioners, I think, had made a comment that you wanted it to be sure that all of the persons in a single-family dwelling make it clear that they weren't related to each other. And I looked at that, and honestly, I think the language really says it the way it's written already, and I really couldn't come up with something that read differently, that described it better. So my recommendation, I think, is just to leave the language as it is, and that is households of more than 6 persons in which any one person is unrelated to any or all of the others. I think that's fairly clear. Hopefully you agree. If not, I can try and rework the language, but I went through it one time and was struggling with it. So, if you recall, another issue we looked at was review of the land use element and consideration of a new Growth Management Act requirement to consider utilizing urban planning approaches that promote physical activity. And on September 10th, you endorsed a preliminary recommendation to add a new policy, and I've shown it there, LUP 19. I won't read the entire policy since you've already endorsed that. In addition, related to that last requirement, we included 2 policies and 2 actions from the community services element, which is proposed to be deleted from the plan. And I've put the policies up here for you just to see one more time. And I'm sorry, I forgot to add the 2 actions. I apologize for that. I had intended to add those to this slide as well. But there are 2 policies and 2 actions that are simply being carried over from the previous community services element to into the land use element. One of the items that was unresolved from the last time we met was the issue of the table on page LU-10. You had made a request that I revise the table to reflect total population numbers for the city, as well as just the additional capacity that we're required to accommodate. So I've attempted to do that in this table, and hopefully it's a lot clearer for you. I think it works well. I'll run through the table really quickly. So the first column is simply the part of the county, city that we're talking about, whether it's the King or Snohomish County portion. The next column is the city's 2014 OFM, Office of Financial Management, population estimate. That's our actual population for 2014 for the King County portion and the Snohomish County portion and the total city population. So that is our current population estimate. The next column is the 2035 population target in additional persons. So this is how many additional persons we're required to accommodate by county and also total. So you add the first column to the second column and you get a total current 2014 plus target population, and that's that number. And then the next column shows the population capacity. So the 2014 population plus our additional capacity that we have, and that gives you a capacity number. And the last column shows you when you compare the target population to the capacity, whether you have a surplus or a deficit in persons. So hopefully that's clearer. I'd be glad to have receive any feedback from you on that. Steve, did I address your concerns?
Yeah, I was going to wait till I had comments, but I'll jump in now. So I recall asking that and feeling that the previous table was not very clear, and I've already noted here it's much better,
Okay.
and you've met everything that I felt needed. It just reads well as you kind of go left to right, so thank you very much. The only this is very minor, and I don't think it's necessary, but when I saw OFM, it did not necessarily jump out at me that we're talking about Office of Financial Management.
And as
I don't know if you want to put an
I thought the
asterisk
same
there.
thing, so
You might put an asterisk there and just put Office of Financial Management underneath, just so the reader can. And I know that in the previous page it's mentioned several times, but
Yeah.
that would be it's a nit, but minor.
As I read it back to you here in the isolated table, the same thought occurred to me.
Yeah.
I think there's actually room in the column there to just spell it out, so I'll do
Okay.
that.
Either way.
Yeah.
But other than that, I thought it read very well.
I appreciate that comment
Yep.
because I think showing the capacity deficit or surplus in terms of the entire population, total population, really does make the table read better, so I appreciate that comment.
Yep. So thank you.
With regards to the employment, I think I made a comment in the staff memo. You can't do the same thing for employment because we don't track employment numbers like we do population with an annual estimate. We have, I don't want to say vague, but OFM has, well, they are more vague. They're not. We don't do an annual estimate of employment. So what we have is OFM estimates for employment, and we don't necessarily have them by specific year. So in the case of employment, I struggle with this a little bit, but I think the employment table really sort of needs to stay the way it is because I don't really have an employment number to break it out for Snohomish and King County the way we do for population. If you really want, I can work more on that, and I can contact somebody at OFM and try to come up with those numbers, but
Not necessary for
they're
my
not
standpoint.
great numbers anyway. They really are estimates in the case of employment.
I don't see any. I think that's fine as is.
Okay.
Do we need to have that
Did
table
you have
on
a
there?
question?
That was one note when I was reading through. I was just wondering if there's a way to show percent increase, or, I mean, is that a 25% increase over what we currently have, or
Well, I think
how big of a scale?
Yeah, I think
But-
we might have the same issue though, because I'd still be working from a very ballpark estimate. So saying it's 25% would be 25% of a ballpark estimate, I guess.
Gary, if we don't have firm numbers, do we even need that table in there? I mean,
Well,
why not just remove it?
Maybe we don't need the table. We certainly need a statement that says that we have adequate employment capacity and show the
Right.
numbers in the statement, I think.
Right.
But perhaps we don't need the table. I can certainly
Because I think
look at
that I think the table implies that those are accurate and specific numbers. If we just have a statement that says that we have, adequate employment capacity, that might be.
Is that just a requirement, though? I mean, do we need to?
We do need to show that we have adequate employment capacity, and we're able to do that.
And if we just say we have adequate, but we kind of don't show any kind of method for how we got to adequate, is that going to?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm thinking too. Let me think about that more, and when we come back to you with the integrated review, I'll bring it up as a get back to you point. But
And along the line of Commissioner Cabe's question about percent increase, so do we have? It looks like both of these are target numbers, 2035 target. Do we have anything of where we are currently, and then what like he's saying, what this target in 2035 would represent in the way of an increase?
We do, and I think maybe that's the way to approach it, is to look at the previous, where we were previously versus where we are now, and then use those as comparisons.
It might be pretty easy to do and could be an improvement.
Yeah. And it sounds like Bill has a comment to make, too, regarding this issue.
The dynamics of employment growth or shrinkage are completely different from population. Population grows incrementally in pretty small increments. Employment can shift so rapidly. For example, when Boeing needed room to build its 777 wing plant, they knocked down a couple of office buildings. They needed a place to put those engineers. the place happened to be Bothell. They are now occupying space in 6 buildings in the North Creek and Canyon Park business parks. That's several thousand jobs that weren't anticipated. They did the tenant improvements, and all of a sudden they're here. At the same time, large businesses can leave almost literally overnight. So there's nothing more difficult than tracking and projecting employment. Gary was saying we know what our capacity is, but figuring out the actual number of jobs here is very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, I see your point, that the capacity is something we can calculate based on land designation and amount of land, and there's a formula, I'm sure, that gives us the capacity, but the actual number, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And OFM is obligated, they're required to provide us population numbers. They're not required to provide us with employment numbers. But our most reliable source is the Puget Sound Regional Council, and they tend to lag behind by a couple of years.
But just to close this out, for the purposes of the plan, do we need to have employment, both capacity as well as kind of current status in the plan?
We do need to show that we have enough capacity to accommodate forecasted employment growth.
Okay. All right. Then let's leave it in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So that's really my presentation. Hopefully I caught everything that you asked me to catch last time. Our staff recommendation for this tonight would simply be to continue the 2015 Periodic Plan and Code Update to February 11th, 2015. It's my understanding, I believe that I think you're probably done with your review of land use element at this point, unless you tell me otherwise. You will see it back again as part of the integrated review. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might still have outstanding from land use.
Great, thank you. And Gary, maybe I missed that. Did you have a proposed motion for us? Is it right there?
Essentially what it is on the screen.
Is that right there?
Yeah, okay. Bruce gave you a more specific recommendation to complete your deliberations on Canyon Park.
Okay, so that's the motion that you recommend.
Yeah, I'm happy if you simply continue the Periodic Plan and Code Update to next week.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none from my fellow commissioners, I have very few. We did talk about the table. I just wanted to thank you for that. On page LU11, staff recommends RAC for Canyon Park and the Red Barn Village. Is there a way, as part of the future planning work for the Nike Hill area, that RAC could be considered as part of the rework for that area?
Yes, we likely will consider RAC. Whether it's for all or part of that area, I really can't tell you at this point, but that's probably one of the designations we would certainly explore.
Could we add that as, if by adding that in this language, is that too prescriptive at this point, or what's the reason for or against adding that as a line item on, say, page LU11?
Where are you looking at specifically, Steve? On that
you've got the green box on page LU11.
That's a staff comment note box, so we can really put whatever you want in there.
Well, I'd request that adding RAC for Nike Hill, and just to quickly wordsmith it, I'm just saying as part of
the
planning rework for that area.
Okay.
Is there any objection? I don't see any up here for that. And then my next question had to do with TDR, and I support deferring that for the reasons. Is there any type of timeline for picking that back up? Maybe you mentioned that, but just to clarify that.
Yeah, I think, and there is a timeline sort of implicit in or stated in the proposed action, and I think it really makes sense now to really tie further exploration of TDR to the Canyon Park Regional Growth Center.
I noticed that.
Urban Design Study. So that's what I've tried to do in that action. But I've also tried to say that if we don't get the funding for that study, because it's going to be a six-figure number, that we should move forward with TDR anyway.
Is there,
At least move
I'd
forward
just
with
be
exploring
the
TDR.
general positive, the idea of TDRs, the funding that could come from it as part of the Canyon Park regional, how are you describing it? The
Regional Growth Center.
The growth center for Canyon Park?
And the reason for incorporating it into that Canyon Park analysis and that study is that we've heard from some property owners in the business center that they're not necessarily opposed to the concept of TDR, but they don't really understand it very well, and that they feel they should have some base right to residential before TDR is required. We didn't examine that as a pro forma in the analysis with community attributes, so that's something we would likely need to do. It makes sense to do that as part of that Canyon Park Business Center study so that we can look at it in terms of overall urban design of the area.
And as a potential funding source for it?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
But that's the reason for tying those two together.
Commissioner Cabe.
So just to follow up, rather than a barrier for development at all, it would be a bonus density or some other measure that they could use.
Correct.
Steve, I got one quick question.
Commissioner Vliet.
Yeah, just with regards to TDRs and your experience in talking to property owners, so is the reluctancy to tie on TDRs a requirement specific to that particular area, or would it pretty much would that argument be made for almost any area that you were going to?
We specifically spoke to business owners in the Canyon Park Business Center because that's primarily where we were looking at implementing it initially. And again, they weren't necessarily opposed to the concept of TDR, although those particular business owners hadn't been involved in TDR very much. There are developers who do TDRs and who seek them out, as you heard from Darren Greavy from King County, as well as community attributes. But I think in the business center, it is a new thing for them, so they need to be able to wrap their heads around it a little more and understand it better too. Their comment was, how come we can't have some base residential allowance, without having to do TDR? And our comment was, well, because you don't have that allowance now, so we figured if you want to do residential, we'll make TDR required. But they didn't like that idea. In fact, they were quite opposed to it. So we would like to just explore that possibility in more detail, and that's just going to take more time. And I think it really should be done as part of the analysis for that whole business center.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions of staff at this point, so I think we're ready to make a motion with regards to the land use element. So the proposed motion that you have there is a fairly generic, you're just basically asking us to continue the periodic plan and code update to next week, which I'm obviously we're going to do. But is there any particular motion or action that you would like us to take on the land use element specifically today, or does that have to come forward on our agenda one more time?
Well, it's going to come back to you as part of the integrated review, but if you would like to include in your motion something as Bruce suggested, cease deliberations on the land use element, you could do that.
I think we're ready to do that. So I think we're in the mode now of when we're ready to, let's clear items off of our agenda. So if one of you would like to make a motion to continue the plan, but also include in your motion Planning Commission complete our deliberations of the proposed land or the land use element, I think that would get approved.
Yeah, I'll motion that we consider the land use discussion completed and move to continue the periodic plan and code update to February 11th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
We have no other items, I don't believe, on our agenda. We don't have a study session, old business. Any staff reports?
I don't have anything unless Bruce or Bill do.
No?
Nope.
Reports from members? None? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.